Having recently covered AMD's re-released Ryzen 7 5800X 3D for $350 US, I concluded this thing simply doesn't make sense for those of you who aren't already on the AM4 platform. It just costs way too much for what it is, and the price nullifies the advantage of the cheaper DDR4 memory for new system builders. But what if you already have DDR4 memory and you just need a CPU or motherboard? Does the 5800X 3D 10th Anniversary Edition make sense then? Or should you look to Intel instead? And that's what we'll be exploring in this video as I retest the Core i7-14700K, but this time with DDR4 memory. Today's sponsor spot is brought to you by ASUS and their new Neo motherboard lineup, including the Tough Gaming X870 Pro Wi-Fi 7 Neo, ROG Strix B850 Gaming Neo, and ROG Strix X870 EA Gaming Neo. Built for AMD's AM5 platform, the Neo range has been refreshed with upgraded power delivery to ensure maximum stability for the latest Ryzen processors. ASUS has also improved the building experience with their easy PC do-it-yourself features, including PCIe Q release, which allows you to remove your graphics card quickly without fighting with the retention clip. The Neo series also includes enhanced AI networking features, intelligent CPU cooling optimization, and redesigned memory pathways to improve signal quality, helping users to get more out of their high-speed DDR5 memory. So whether you're putting together a new system or upgrading your platform, learn more about the ASUS Neo motherboard range via the link in the video description. Okay, so it's been quite a while since I last tested any 13th and 14th gen Intel Core series processors with DDR4 memory, because up until late last year, it didn't really make sense as you'd simply pair them with DDR5, given that pricing was much the same and DDR5 generally offered better performance. Not only that, but 2 years ago now, we made a video explaining why we can no longer recommend Intel's 13th and 14th gen processors, due to the very real degradation concerns, which Intel has since acknowledged and apparently addressed. Still, for those of you who were building a new PC or performing a platform upgrade in 2024 or even 2025, investing in Intel's LGA 1700 platform didn't really seem like the wisest of choices. Certainly not when you could get aboard the AM5 train for around the same price. But it's 2026 now and things are more broken than a heavily degraded 14900K. So why not give the LGA 1700 platform another shot? The advantage of Intel's platform is that it can use either DDR4 or DDR5 memory, and this is dictated by your choice of motherboard. So given that you can purchase the Core i5-14600K for $250 US right now, or the Core i7-14700K for $370 US, roughly the same price as the 5800X 3D, they might be worth considering. After all, the 14700K offers anywhere from 70 to 130% stronger core-heavy productivity performance than the 5800X 3D, and although it consumes significantly more power, the Core i7 part is relatively easy to manage. Now, the focus for this testing will be on the Core i7-14700K, and while I would have liked to also include the 14600K, I've been forced to source a new chip as my current model is having some sort of stability issue. Not exactly sure what's wrong with it, but it can't be used for testing, so unfortunately I'll have to wait until I can get a new one. That said though, the 14600K and 14700K, they're not massively different when it comes to gaming performance. In past tests, we've found the Core i7 model to be about 5 to 9% faster on average, using either DDR4 or DDR5 memory. But anyway, I just wanted to explain why the Core i5-14600K hasn't been included. So for the DDR4 configurations, I'm using DDR4 3600CL14 memory, and of course we are targeting CPU limited gaming scenarios, so we're testing with a high-end GPU at a low-end resolution. Cue the screeches. Okay, let's get into it. Starting with Rainbow Six Siege, we see the 14700K mauls the 5800X 3D by a 25% margin when using the medium preset, allowing for 503 FPS opposed to just 401 FPS. This placed the Core i7 processor alongside the 9600X and just 8% slower than the 7800X 3D. The same 25% margin is maintained with the Ultra Plus preset, so clearly the Core i7 processor is much faster in this title. Shifting to Marvel Rivals, the 14700K finds itself in a much tighter battle against the 5800X 3D. Using the medium preset, the Intel chip edges out a minor victory with 180 FPS compared to the older AMD processor's 178 FPS. This performance locks the 14700K just behind the 9600X, though it falls noticeably short of the 7800X 3D here. Interestingly, scaling up to the Ultra preset slightly widens the 14700K's lead over the 5800X 3D to a 6% advantage. However, the real surprise in this title is the Core Ultra 5 250K Plus, which flips the script from the previous game and surges to the top of our graph with the Ultra settings, outperforming even the 7800X 3D. Moving on, the 14700K produces solid numbers in Horizon Zero Dawn Remastered, though it sits firmly in the middle of our pack. Testing with the medium preset yields an average of 187 FPS, allowing it to edge past the 9600X while falling short of the 5800X 3D. Stepping up to the very high settings shows a pretty similar story. The 14700K drops to 160 FPS, keeping it ahead of the 9600X while still trailing the 5800X 3D by about a 4% margin. Now with Baldur's Gate 3, the 14700K sits in a tight cluster amongst the modern mid-range options. Using the medium preset, it produced 141 FPS on average, matching the 9600X and 250K Plus, though it was significantly slower than the 5800X 3D, trailing by an almost 20% margin. And the dynamic stays much the same using the Ultra preset. Here the 14700K allows for 122 FPS on average, mirroring that of the 9600X and 250K Plus once more. In Cyberpunk 2077 Phantom Liberty, using the medium preset, the 14700K managed an average of 158 FPS, and that placed it below the 7500F, and it trailed the 5800X 3D by roughly 12%. Then, when enabling the intensive ray tracing Ultra preset, we see the frame rates compress due to the increased GPU bottleneck. The 14700K delivered an average of 109 FPS, landing it in a near tie with the 7500F. Notably, the Core Ultra 5 250K Plus shows a significant architectural advantage over the older Core i7 here, hitting 124 FPS to position itself well ahead of the 14700K. In Arc Raiders, the 14700K sits firmly within the middle tiers of our benchmark graph. Testing with the medium preset saw it allow for 169 FPS on average, and that allowed it to stay hot on the heels of the 9600X, though it did trail the 5800X 3D by a wide margin, coming in 17% slower. The margin remains much the same using the Epic preset with static RT enabled. Here the 14700K averaged 168 FPS, making it 19% slower than the 5800X 3D, though the 1% low performance was similar. Space Marine 2 provides highly competitive results between the two DDR4 enabled processors. With the medium preset, the Core i7 averaged 102 FPS, placing it just a frame behind the 9600X, while more crucially, it did trail the 5800X 3D, but by just a 4% margin. And the performance profile remains virtually unchanged when moving to the Ultra preset. The 14700K averaged 96 FPS, locking it in a direct tie with the 9600X, and that meant the 5800X 3D ended up just a few frames ahead. The 14700K enjoyed an excellent showing in The Last of Us Part 2 Remastered, placing it right near the top of our graph. Using the medium settings, it hit 185 FPS on average, outperforming the 7800X 3D by a few frames, and comfortably beating out the 5800X 3D's 172 FPS to win by an 8% margin. We also saw a similar thing when using the very high preset. The 14700K secures a strong 184 FPS average, once again pushing ahead of the 7800X 3D. It only gives up the crown to the Core Ultra 5 250K Plus, which leads with both configurations. Next up, we have Spider-Man 2, and here the Core i7 14700K delivers a very strong showing. Using the medium preset, it outpaced the 5800X 3D by an 11% margin, delivering 203 FPS compared to 183 FPS, while also providing a notable 13% improvement to 1% lows. Then, when enabling the very demanding Ultra Ray Tracing preset, the Intel processor stretches its legs even further. Here the 14700K pulled away from the 5800X 3D by a substantial 24% margin, averaging 89 FPS compared to just 72 FPS. It also offers a massive 25% uplift in 1% low performance, proving that the Core i7 processor is clearly the superior option in this title, particularly once heavy ray tracing workloads are thrown into the mix. Moving on to Mafia The Old Country, here the 14700K continues to hold a comfortable lead over the 3D Vcache veteran. Testing with the medium preset shows the Core i7 pulling ahead of the 5800X3D by a 6% margin, averaging 115 FPS compared to 108 FPS. The 1% lows also see a minor 8% bump in favour of the Intel processor. Cranking the settings up with the Epic preset doesn't really change the dynamic much. The 14700K drops to 96 FPS, but maintains its lead over the 5800X3D by a 4% margin. The 1% lows also remain slightly better on the Core i7 at 65 FPS versus 62 FPS, proving it to be the consistently faster performer here, even if it does get outpaced by the newer Core Ultra 5 250K+. Moving on to the ACC results, we see a complete flip in the script, as this title heavily favours AMD's 3D Vcache technology. Using the medium settings, the 14700K falls behind the 5800X3D by a 4% margin, managing 216 FPS compared to 226 FPS. The deficit remains very similar when switching over to the Epic preset. Here the 14700K registered 170 FPS, leaving it roughly 5% slower than the 5800X3D's 179 FPS. Finally, the last game tested is Borderlands 4, and here the 14700K delivers an exceptionally strong showing, virtually matching the top performers in our graph. Starting with the medium data, the 14700K outpaced the 5800X3D by a 9% margin, delivering 159 FPS compared to 146 FPS, while also providing a notable 13% improvement to the 1% lows. Then when we step up to the demanding badass preset, the field compresses significantly as we are more GPU limited, but the Intel chip maintains its edge over the older Zen 3 part. Here the 14700K averaged 101 FPS compared to the 5800X3D's 98 FPS, netting it a modest 3% performance advantage. It also holds a 12% lead for the 1% lows, ensuring that the Core i7 remains the faster and smoother option across both of the tested configurations in this title. Now, here we have the 12-game average data, and as you can see, the Core i7 14700K and Ryzen 7 5800X3D are neck and neck. Looking at the medium data, the 14700K and 5800X3D are locked frame for frame with an average of 177 FPS, while the Intel chip holds a completely negligible 1-frame margin for the 1% lows at 132 FPS versus 131 FPS. Moving over to the more GPU-bound, higher quality preset data, the narrative remains identical. Both processors cross the finish line perfectly tied at 141 FPS on average, with the 14700K offering a negligible improvement to the 1% lows, 106 FPS versus 105 FPS for the 5800X3D. Ultimately, across the entirety of our testing, the Core i7 14700K and Ryzen 7 5800X3D provided functionally identical overall gaming performance, making it a complete wash between the two overall. So there you have it. The 14700K and 5800X3D are very much neck and neck when pairing both of them with DDR4 memory, which really does make perfect sense. In our day one review, the 14700K was on average 20% faster than the 5800X3D for gaming, but the Core i7 was paired with DDR5 7200 CL34 memory. We've since found that the 14th gen CPUs are around 16% faster when using DDR5 opposed to DDR4. And we were comparing DDR4 3600 to DDR5 7200. So based on that rough math alone, the 14700K and 5800X3D should be very close when using DDR4 memory, and surprise, surprise, it turns out they are. All three of these tests, the 3-year-old day 1 14700K review, the 2-year-old DDR4 versus DDR5 memory testing, and today's 14700K revisit, featured some of the same games, but also many different games. And despite that, as I said, the math checks out. So for those of you with DDR4 memory looking for a CPU to pair with it, if you're looking at primarily gaming, it really doesn't matter too much which of these CPUs you choose, the 14700K or the 5800X3D. The overall experience really is going to be much the same. The advantage of the 5800X3D is that it consumes a lot less power, around 20% less when gaming, and much more for productivity, but it's also generally much slower for productivity tasks, so it doesn't really matter too much there. And both CPUs do tend to run quite hot, though neither of them are particularly difficult to keep in check, so I don't believe this to be of a real concern. The 5800X3D has the advantage of being able to deliver the type of performance demonstrated in this video using basically any DDR4 memory kit, as the larger L3 cache means that they're not particularly memory sensitive. The 14700K is certainly less memory sensitive than, say, the 12700K, again thanks to its larger caches, but when paired with good quality DDR4 memory like the CL14 kit that I used, it had no problem matching the 5800X3D. That said, if you are using weaker DDR4 memory, the 5800X3D could pull slightly ahead, but also, if you're willing to tune your memory, the 14700K will benefit more than the 5800X3D. For a make-do DDR4 gaming system, I really don't think you can go wrong with either of these options. If just gaming, I think the 5800X3D is a little more attractive as it sips power, and it really is the ultimate no-fuss solution. But if you're interested in productivity performance, particularly core-heavy productivity performance, then the 14700K is without question the CPU to get. There's also the 14600K to consider, which will be at most 10% slower than the 14700K for gaming, so at just $250 US, it is a viable option for gaming and productivity, of course. All of that said, I really think you should only consider these CPUs if you already have DDR4 memory, or in the case of the 5800X3D, you're already on AM4, which means you'd already have DDR4 memory. So for gamers, I don't think it's worth buying the 14700K, DDR4 memory, and an LGA 1700 motherboard for a new system build or a platform upgrade. The CPU costs $370 US right now. 32GB of DDR4 costs at least $190 for a half-decent 3200 kit, and a decent DDR4 motherboard costs $140, though you are pretty limited there. You're looking at like a B760 model. So anyway, that's $700 for that particular package. But again, if you're after productivity performance, I think it is a pretty sweet deal, though I'd personally much prefer the Intel Core Ultra 7 270K Plus for $310. You do need DDR5 memory, which is a bit of a bummer. A 32GB kit right now, that'll set you back at least $400. And then, of course, you will need a Z890 motherboard, or that's probably what you should go with, and you can expect to pay at least $170 for that sort of board. And that takes the total to $880 US, and it's a 26% premium, which I think you could argue is worth it. And again, that's probably the way I would go, but you will also need almost $200 US more on hand. So whether or not that's available to you, I guess it's going to depend on your budget, isn't it? Of course, pricing will vary from one region to the next, and there are also some pretty solid package type deals to be had. Of course, those are also region dependent, and they're often only available for a limited time, which is why we don't cover them in this content, because by the time you watch this, the package deal's probably not going to be available. So yeah, no point covering, say, a Micro Center deal in this video, because, it could be gone tomorrow. But needless to say, you now have all the benchmark data, so you can evaluate what pricing is available at the time, deals and whatnot, and then work out which one of these best suits your needs. Anyway, I think I'll leave it at this. The 5800X3D still only makes sense at $350 US for those of you already on AM4, and then the 14700K, it really only makes sense if you have a stack of DDR4 memory on hand and you're looking for a cost-effective CPU that still offers a lot of performance, and you can pair that with a motherboard, and away you go. The 14700K certainly does deliver those people a lot of bang for their buck. Again, productivity performance is very impressive even by today's standards. But anyway, that is going to do it for this video. Hopefully you liked this updated look at the 14700K using DDR4 memory, and what that could also mean for like a 14600K, because it's not going to be that much slower than this thing for gaming. So although I wasn't able to test it, still going to give you a very good idea of where that CPU sits, because they scale pretty similar with DDR4 and DDR5 memory. Like I said, that is going to do it for this video. If you liked it, give it a thumbs up, please. Subscribe for more content. And if there's any other comparisons or updates you'd like to see us go and revisit, then let us know in the comment section, or just let us know which one of these CPUs you think is best to pair with DDR4 memory moving forward, because yeah, always interested to get your thoughts on these sorts of things. I'm your host, Steve. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you again next time.